Hey, everybody, and welcome to episode 4 of season 3 of Pete Carroll Was Right, the confusingly named Alabama football live video show. We are coming to you for the first time this season at full strength, although Mitch has had to go through great technological lengths to get here. But, we're all here, so
I'm just realizing my phone's on like super low battery too, so I'm gonna grab my charger.
The comedy of errors right now.
Yeah.
Good though. Bonjour, everyone.
Yeah, Mitch. Mitch makes his triumphant return despite these difficulties, so we're excited about that for sure.
Yeah.
So we're excited to have an SEC game to talk about this week, at least. It might be just Vandy, but they've had a nice little season so far, coming off a pretty good win off of against a ranked Kansas State team, giving up like 13 points on the year. So it's always fun to make the trip to Nashville. So that's where we are.
Yeah. So should we start with a little Colorado State?
Yeah. Honestly, I'm not gonna. We spent enough time last week ranting and raving about how you can't make takeaways from paycheck games like this. And yes, the defense wasn't nearly as good as they would have liked it to have been, and the offense kind of let up on the gas at times. But at one point they were up 41-10 in the fourth quarter. So I just don't know how much stock you're going to put on that. I really, really liked what I saw from Jalen in that game. He had a couple plays where he left the pocket too early probably, but honestly, he made some great throws. He was as effective as a runner as he ever is. Yeah.
You never really need a play in a paycheck game because ultimately, no matter what the score was at halftime or what the score was at some point in the third quarter, the end result was already written. But if there was ever a time when Alabama kind of needed a play in a paycheck game, it was that throw to Robert Foster at the end of the second half. And that was a really nice throw.
Yeah, that one was a nice throw. The one to Calvin for a long touchdown was a nice throw. He kind of split two defenders on that one. And then my favorite one was the last one he made before coming out of the game for Tua was where he got the ball and kind of scanned the field and then just dropped a lob in, basically just a beautiful little ball over the top for Devontae Smith's first career catch.
Yeah.
So that was a hell of a throw. That it's good to see Robert Foster get the ball and turn the Jets on like that.
He's fast. I don't know if I realized that he was that fast. And then
that made me think of after the national championship game in 2015 when they had Deshaun on the set, and he said he was talking about Kenyon Dragon. He said he fast, he track fast, he came boat fast.
It was pretty great. And it was good.
Yeah.
I was so happy for Robert Foster, too,
Yeah.
because clearly it's been go ahead, Mitch. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, yeah, I totally agree. He's had, just from his first season, we could see the talent. Just nice. And that was a third down, wasn't it? Like a 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9.
I think
which
so.
was, something y'all talked about last week, wanting to see more conversions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we only saw the big area I think in which we all feel that Jalen has made a leap this year from last year was just he's making better throws.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Carter talked about this immediately after the FSU game, and I think you referenced a podcast with somebody from Pro Football Focus about how Jalen's grade in that first game was predominantly on the strength of what they consider these big throws. And he's made those types of throws now 3 straight weeks. And that is just not something that he was doing last year. I'm not trying to say that he didn't make any good throws last year.
Mm-hmm.
He certainly made some, but he's consistently making big time throws week in and week out. And that's, I don't want to lose sight of that because it's a very significant thing here in terms of, how many plays you're going to get a game, how many explosive plays you're going to get a game. Well, you're going to get explosive plays. You need your quarterback to make big-time throws, and Jalen seems like he's going to be ready to do that this year, at least to a greater extent than last year.
Yeah, so, I don't know if I have a whole lot to add there. It's just he's just making these throws at a much greater rate than he ever did last year, and it's now been consistent. It's happened in all 3 games that he's made these kind of throws, and so I think you at this point you can pretty say definitively that this is an area where he's shown real market improvement, and it's a really encouraging thing to see going into conference play.
Yeah. Would you also say that he's made less turnover plays than last year, at least on balance? Last year, it seemed like toward the end, the last couple games of the season last year in the playoffs, it was almost like Jalen just stopped taking any chances at all and didn't make any turnover plays, and that actually almost worked to his detriment because he lost all of his aggression sort of as a player.
Yeah.
But before that, though, it seemed like he was making 2 or 3 turnover plays a game, sometimes more. Not just throwing the ball, but also running the ball. He would seem his ball handling skills would be a little bit reckless at times. And I feel like we haven't seen that this year either. I feel like he's been very safe with the football. That's not to say there hasn't been any turnover-worthy plays. We've certainly seen a couple. Mm-hmm. I feel very confident that Alabama's not going to turn the ball over with Jalen back there. So far this year.
I mean, obviously they're working on this sort of insane turnoverless streak right now, but he's basically, I would say there have been 2 plays on the year that were what you would call turnover-worthy plays, like that ball against FSU that the one catching himself that Derwin probably could or should have come down with. And then the bad throw he made against Fresno State that should have been intercepted. Other than that, there haven't been any really dangerous balls that he's thrown downfield. There haven't been he hasn't fumbled. I think the only fumble Alabama has at all is that the bad snap from Bozeman in the first game, and
David got on it.
Yeah. And it's nice because it's not, I mean, like we said, he's been making these big time throws. So it's not as though they're playing. I mean, obviously they're running him a lot, but it's not as though he's been hyper conservative as a passer. He's just really hasn't put the ball in bad situations, which has been very nice.
And that's important for this team because you don't have a defense that can bail you out should you turn the ball over.
Exactly. I think that's a great point. So think about the LSU game last year or something. Jalen comes out and I think on the first drive he throws an interception pretty deep in Alabama territory. Mm-hmm. And that stuff could have been afforded last year because what does the defense do? They come out, they force a field goal, and I think they block the field goal and obviously don't give up any points. Well, you're not going to be able to rely on that this year. No more short fields, no more. The margin for error is decreased, so it's more important than ever for, like Mitch said, to not turn the ball over. So I think you have to give him credit there. So what? And obviously Jalen had another nice game as a runner, which is sort of par for the course for him.
Yeah.
Let's talk negatives.
Obviously the defensive performance was far from what you expected it to be. I think there are several factors to point out there. One is that, Colorado State is a pretty solid, Mountain West team. They've got a senior quarterback. They've got one really, really good wide receiver and a couple other decent ones. And again, this has been beat to death, but I don't think you can hammer enough on the fact that literally, and Dylan Moses was out. So they literally were missing 5 of their top 4, 5 of your top 8 linebackers, basically. And I don't care who you are. That's really gonna mess with you. And then, there was some additional sloppiness on top of that from guys that you don't normally see it from. So, you combine all those things and you end up with 23 points and almost 400 yards to a team like Colorado State. I certainly don't think I've said plenty along these lines so far this year. I think people that are panicking about this defense are way overreacting and really aren't factoring in the way, especially that the injuries have hurt them so far. I think it's absolutely fair to say that this defense is not the dominant unit we've seen the last 2 years. That doesn't mean they're not really, really good, and it doesn't mean that even that they're not good enough to take Alabama to a championship. It's just, you lose that kind of talent over 2 years, and there's going to be some kind of drop off. I don't care who you are.
Right. I do think it's interesting though. Obviously, people have been disappointed in the defense the last couple of weeks, and I understand it to an extent, but I feel like it's still what's still being lost is that they played really well against Florida State.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that was the only game to this point that's mattered. And I know that Florida State, the offensive line is kind of an issue in certain places. And and with Akers not being able to play a full complement of snaps, they didn't have a running back that could really challenge Alabama. And the scheme isn't really there to challenge Alabama so much. But the quarterback, was pretty good at times last year. The quarterback has a lot of talent. They had some talented, if not although inexperienced receivers. But that's like, I don't know. Am I wrong to be impressed by that performance still? And I know that most of that performance was with Terrell Hall and Christian Miller, who they're not going to have anymore. But they played well in a lot of areas.
Yeah.
Defensively in that game.
No, I think absolutely people are not giving that. Who after the way things have been the last 2 weeks, people are really not giving that performance enough credit. I think also people are. Honestly, a lot of the issues the last couple of weeks have just been they've just been kind of sloppy, Right. It's stuff that you can absolutely fix. It's not aside from the lack of sort of explosive playmakers along the front, which is something we've talked about plenty, and that's just going to be something that's different from the past 2 years. But other than that, it's not as though there's a talent deficiency anywhere on the field.
Right.
So I don't know. I just don't think it's people are you've got one game versus Florida State, which is one of the 2 or 3 most talented teams in the country, and 2 performances against Fresno State and Colorado State. I don't think people are assigning these performances the proper weight.
Right, which is always the problem.
Yeah. One thing that you could see in the Florida State games that you obviously wouldn't see much in these games is the manufactured pressure.
Absolutely.
Yep.
I mean, I don't remember seeing but 1 or 2 plays in Colorado State game where they brought an extra guy. So I don't know. Missed tackles, kind of sloppy, but when has Alabama ever had a paycheck game where that wasn't the case?
Yeah. They were just it wasn't even like the second half of that Florida State game, they dominated.
Yeah.
The Alabama defense completely dominated.
Oh, yeah, they gave up 0 points and 71 yards or something like that. It was insane.
Right. And where's the credit for that? You know what I mean? You had maybe this is probably a function of 2 things. It's a function of incredibly lofty expectations, and it's a function of, like Carter said, assigning too much weight to paycheck games. But and
recency bias, I think.
Recency bias as well.
Yeah.
But if another team had played like that in the second half, whose expectations aren't where Alabama's expectations are, if another team had that sort of performance on their resume today, the narrative surrounding the defense, I think, would be a lot different.
Yep.
Yeah.
Let's talk some specific players for a second on defense. How much are we buying our new cornerback? Levi. Because now he's grading out very well in every game.
Yeah.
He's not really allowing a lot of receptions. Do we buy this?
I think at this point you kind of have to. I mean, he may not have the pure athleticism that a guy like that Anthony Averett has, but doesn't seem to have hurt him so far. I mean, maybe you'll see him as they get further on and face a few more teams with really, really strong athletes at that position. Maybe you see him get beat down the field a little bit more, but early returns are very impressive.
Ole Miss will be interesting next week. Sorry, I go ahead.
That's all I was going to say. I mean, I think as soon as you start facing a team like Ole Miss, that's the big test for him.
Yeah.
I don't think they've been challenged schematically too much to this point.
Yeah, but it's at least it's reason for optimism, right? I mean, like that was supposed to be the hole going into the season, was the corner spot opposite Avert, and I mean he's played well. The other guy I wanted to mention was this was something that Carter really pointed out in our text chat during the game, which is that Johnny Dwight. Johnny Dwight. I don't want to steal your I don't want to steal your thunder here. This is your guy. So I mean, you want to take it?
Well, it's just I mean, he's what like a redshirt junior. I mean, he's pretty old, right? How long has he been in the program?
It feels like a while. I feel like I've heard his name.
Have seen basically nothing from him. Let's see, he was a redshirt freshman, and he's a redshirt junior. So, and then he's just come in and in 2 straight games had kind of wow plays where he bull rushed guys straight back into the quarterback. He had a sack against Fresno State, and then had a couple really impressive plays where he really got some impressive inside penetration against Colorado State. So maybe it's time for this guy to get a bigger piece of the rotation.
No, I don't see why not. I mean, this is the year, right? This is the year for guys to be able to step up and climb up in the rotation. Unlike the last few years where they were just so stacked. Like, the last 3 years, obviously, they were so stacked at along the defensive line, and less talented players just had no shot to break the rotation. Well, this is some of these guys have been waiting a long time for this opportunity, and maybe John Dwight is the kind of guy that's going to seize it. I mean, that'd be real nice. You put him next to Duran in the middle. That's if he's going to play like that, that's not a bad interior.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're going in 4-man fronts and you can get a little more bulk inside, I think that's I mean, and that's something that'll be even more relevant against Vanderbilt, who Shermer is this is the play they've gotten from him this year has been as much steadier than they've gotten basically from any quarterback under Derek Mason, but they're still not exactly wowing you in the passing game. And they haven't really gotten Ralph Webb going so far, but I think it's fair to say he's their most talented player.
He's the focal point, and the offense is designed around getting him as well.
So against a team like Vandy that's going to look to kind of grind it out against you, I think you're fine playing a little more bulk up front, and slowing them down and really trying to make Shermer beat you. And that's where a guy like Johnny Dwight can have a role. So I would love to see him get significant snaps on Saturday based on what we've seen from him so far.
Yeah. I know we probably should move on to Vandy soon because we spent enough time the last couple of weeks talking about paycheck games. I wanted to make one quick point going back to the offense for a second. We've talked about the last couple of weeks about how they haven't really allowed negative plays this year, and on a similar note, there was an article, maybe it was an AL.com article, I can't quite remember, about how they haven't really committed many penalties either.
Yeah. One penalty on the offensive line. That was that ticky-tack holding call against Lester Cotton.
So that's pretty good.
Yes.
This
looks like the checks to the SEC office in Birmingham
finally going through. Yeah, it's nice to see though, right? I mean, this is not going to be a unit that's going to overwhelm you. This isn't going to be like a 2012 or 2013 unit, but it is the type of unit who could be very solid. And if they don't shoot themselves in the foot, I mean, you can't really ask for much more than that, I don't think.
Yeah. And some of the advanced stats kind of bear out that like what we've been seeing. I mean, Alabama's a pretty solid 32nd in the country in rushing success rate. And then in terms of on offense, the stuff rate, which means that's like the percent of plays where you get stopped at or behind the line of scrimmage. They're 11th in the country at 12%, which is really pretty good. If that low a percentage of your running plays are getting met at the line, basically. This team has really not been great so far on passing downs in terms of success rate. So if that's the kind of situation and you really want to stay ahead of the chains, and if you're getting at least a couple yards on first down and you're not committing penalties and sort of shooting yourself in the foot and getting behind the chains like that helps out a lot.
Yeah. Anybody else? Do you guys have anything else to say about Colorado State or sort of the team in general through 3 weeks, or do we want to move on to Vandy? Vandy it is.
Yeah. At this point, I feel like the entire, other than talk about Florida State specifically, the entirety of the shows thus far has just been sort of like general feelings on the team. And I'm ready for there to be actual games to talk about and actual results and game plans.
Me too.
So Vandy, big thing is their defense. Like I said, they've allowed 13 points so far this year, which, they haven't exactly faced a murderer's row of offenses. It's been, 2 cupcakes and Kansas State, whose offense for approximately the last 30 years has been, run a big, slow white guy at quarterback. But hey, 13 points in 3 games is impressive no matter who you're playing. And they're really, they don't have a ton of great athletes, but they have I think they have a sophomore starting at 1 cornerback spot. And then every other starter on the defense is juniors and seniors.
Yeah. Let's, how about we do, Carter, we were talking a little bit about this before. Let's do defense. Let's do Vandy defense versus Alabama offense first. You want to run through the advanced stats that we were talking about before the show started, just to sort of give a feel for how they performed up to date or to date?
Yeah. And you mentioned that you had watched most of the K-State game and sort of bore this out. They really haven't been great against the run so far. Success rate just 50th in the country. They've given up a fair amount of explosive runs. Power success rate 117th in the country. Stuff rate pretty good. They're making a lot, which is bears out a lot of what I've heard, that they've been playing pretty aggressively this year. So when you're playing aggressively like that, you're going to tend to give up more big plays, but also kind of make more plays behind the line. And then and obviously they haven't really faced anyone with a lick of ability to throw the ball, but in terms of passing, they've been, and you almost never see this combination. Usually it's teams that have really good success rates tend to have kind of higher the metric. This is Bill Connolly's advanced stats that he uses, and the metric he uses for explosiveness is what's called ISO PPP, which basically is of the successful plays you give up, how big of plays are those. And so usually you have teams like Alabama last year that basically are not giving up any successful plays at all, but the ones they're giving up are big. Well, Vandy, against the pass, and again, not great offenses throwing the ball so far, passing success rate 2nd in the country, 14.8%. 15% of passes against them have been successful plays, which is insane. And then ISO PPP 1st in the country. So, which is an interesting, you tend to think of offenses like this being really solid and playing the run well, and then sort of lower talent teams like this maybe being more vulnerable against the pass, but that's really not what has been the case for Vandy this year.
Yeah. So just to start it off by talking about, Mitch, did you get a chance to watch any Vandy also?
Yeah, just a little bit of the K-State game. Okay.
Did you have any sort of big impressions of that?
Yeah, I think I saw the stat line on their quarterback. He had 24 rushes or some ridiculous, and with a 5 yard
right
per 5 yard per rush carry. Jalen is able to get that type of production, I don't think it should be too much of a struggle.
Yeah.
I mean, I think maybe I don't know if we want to talk strategy, but I mean, do you kind of run to open up the throw in this game? Like,
well, the big thing the big thing that stuck out to me watching the Kansas State offense against the Vandy defense is exactly what Mitch is talking about. Not only did they have success running the quarterback, but it was really easy success. Like, they did not have to work hard for these yards. They particularly had a lot of success running the quarterback off tackle on some like design counters. Kansas State runs a lot of design keeps all the way for their quarterbacks. It's not so much option. It's really just like use the running back as a lead blocker and just run the quarterback. And there were just big avenues for them to run through in that game. Now, that quarterback is not the runner that Jalen is, both in terms of, well, in terms of everything. There is nothing that he does remotely as well as Jalen does. So, it's the first sort of point, I guess, to be made as far as how Alabama is going to attack them is that they're going to run Jalen. How much they're going to run Jalen, at least early on, like, see, this is what I sort of always struggle with. In a game like this, which Alabama is, not to spoil any predictions for the end of the show, but in a game like this that Alabama is not going to lose, how aggressive do you be with your quarterback in terms of running the ball? I feel like this is we asked this question like every single game last year, I feel like. So I'm curious as far as what you guys think before we sort of continue on with how they should attack Vanderbilt in terms of what's going to give them the most chance for success on a play-to-play basis. Let's sort of first tackle the idea of how likely they are to run Jalen a lot, sort of like how Kansas State did, considering other factors here, such as sort of possibility of injury. Like, do you care about that?
I honestly no, and I mean I don't like the way it's gone the last 2 weeks. They have shown no reluctance at all to put the game on Jalen's legs, despite those games being even more decided from the beginning than this one is. I don't think you're gonna. This is not gonna be Kansas State. They're not gonna run him 25 times, but I would not be surprised to see 10 to 15 non-sack carries.
Me too. So I think the first thing is that if you're Alabama, you're going to come out and run Jalen. You're going to make them show that they can stop Jalen. Now, how they're going to do that, what they're going to try to do, is going to create opportunities for Alabama in other ways. They're the most success that they had stopping the quarterback run game against Kansas State was sort of blitzing linebackers up the A and B gaps. Now, I would imagine that they're going to have to do that against Alabama, right, in order to have any chance to slow down the run game. Because if they let Jalen sort of pick his way through holes and whatnot, it just sort of against like a non-aggressive front, Alabama's just going to run all over them. Even if they're not getting 10, 15 yards a carry, they're going to be getting 5 or 6 yards a carry, and they're just going to be consistently ahead of the chains. So I would think that the only chance that they have is to sort of bring a lot of bodies. So then the question becomes, if they're doing that and if it's somewhat successful, how do you counter that if you're Alabama? And I guess I don't want to spoil everything here. So but there's a lot of options, right? As far as how you're going to attack a front playing that aggressively.
The answers are what they usually are in a certain sense. You throw screens, you throw quick passes. You basically, they bring the house at you, and you dump it off right in behind in the areas that they leave vacant, essentially. Whether you're talking about, little quick hitches and slants and screens and stuff like that. draws, both quarterback and otherwise. Yeah, a lot of stuff like that I think are among your options.
The big thing that I would like to see this game, I think this could be a big RPO game for Alabama as far as how they manage early down and trying to stay ahead of the chains. But I'd specifically like to see maybe some more post snap reads in the RPO game to sort of sort of read keys that you can't necessarily read before the play, which is like if they're going to blitz these inside linebackers, I'd like to see Jalen being given some opportunities there to read that and make some post snap reads in terms of whether to run the ball, maybe run the ball himself, or maybe whether to throw it out quickly to a slot wide receiver or a tight end or something of that nature.
Yeah, or like the one of my favorite plays in recent years was one that was an RPO they ran against Wisconsin in the very first game in 2015, where they had they were keying off a linebacker, and when the linebacker bit on the run, Jake Coker just basically tossed the ball to O.J. Howard going up the seam, which I thought was a really nice play. And if they're being aggressive in terms of bringing outside linebackers and stuff like that, there are plenty of plays you can run where you're keying off like flat defenders basically, and if they come in and play the run, you can just flip it out behind them basically. These sort of classic plays where you're really keying on one defender and just making it so that he is wrong no matter what he does.
Yeah. One of the other things that I'm sort of interested in, and I wonder because of how aggressive we think that Vanderbilt is going to be in terms of bringing extra guys at the point of attack, whether we see less 11 personnel from Alabama. I think that's going to be very telling in terms of what the offensive strategy is going to be the rest of the year, in that, like, can a defense who's going to be super aggressive at the point of attack sort of dictate terms against Alabama and bring them into and sort of force them to use other personnel groupings? Or if Alabama is sort of just content on always staying in 11 and just making 11 work no matter what the defense is gonna show you. Be sort of for under in the Kiffin years, right? It was sort of a 11 all the time, right? Yep. It was especially the last two Kiffin years. It was just, or especially the last Kiffin year, it was just 11 all the time. And this is, again, very similar offense to last year in terms of personnel and in terms of sort of offensive philosophy. So I'm interested to see whether we see more of a mix on Saturday personnel-wise, if we see a lot of 12 personnel, or if it's really just going to be 11 again, 11, 70, 75% of the time. Right. And it's just like, okay, well, you want to bring those bodies, that's fine. We're going to try to still have our playmakers on the outsides. So I'm not really sure what the answer is, but I think that's something that I'm very interested to see. Yeah,
and I guess it'll be interesting to see where, obviously it sucks to lose another player for the whole year again. I don't think Miller Forrestall is an essential player to this offense at all, but whether or not losing one of your top three tight ends affects that calculus in terms of how willing Dable is to use two tight ends.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely another thing, and I'm interested to see also, like, for Alabama, this could also be a game. We've talked a lot, and we already talked in this podcast already about how Jalen's sort of improved in his ability to make big throws. Well, this is a game where they're going to be so aggressive, and I can't imagine that they're going to be able to sit in sort of two deep safety shell if you're Vanderbilt in this game and do that. So I would think that they're going to be forced to sort of bring extra guys into the box. And I'd like to think that Alabama is really going to take some shots, especially between the 40s, to stretch the field vertically and try to both get Calvin and Robert Foster sort of taking the top off the defense. So I'd look to see a lot of that too.
Well, and these wide receivers, as we said, showed they were capable of consistently getting open downfield against Florida State's secondary.
Wow.
So they're definitely going to be able to do that especially when they're one-on-one against Vandy's defensive backs. And when you get those matchups, they can give Jalen time to push the ball downfield. I think there's definitely room for Alabama that you can definitely see a way where Alabama hits a lot of big plays in this game because the opportunities are going to be there.
Yeah, I think this is a game. I totally agree with that. I think this is a game where I'd like to see a lot of big plays. And then the other thing, and Carter, you alluded to this too. I'd like to see maybe if the running back screen game could make a little bit of a comeback. That used to be obviously a big staple of the Alabama defense. I'm sorry, of the Alabama offense in years past. And with under Kiffin, it was sort of less so, I would say.
Like Bo Scarborough already has more catches this year than he did all of last year.
Right, and this is a game. I really think where that could be featured again against like an uber aggressive front. So I'd look to see some of that too.
Yeah,
especially if you're getting a guy like Josh Jacobs back this week. I mean, I feel like he would excel in that type of. I mean, he's just so good in space.
Yeah, and that was something else that I was going to bring up. One of the things that I would really like to see maybe in terms of if their front, if the Vanderbilt front is going to be sort of super aggressive in terms of sort of trying to win at the point of attack, I'd like to see some sort of two-back sets maybe.
Mm-hmm.
They need to find a way to get more out of these backs than just, especially with Jacobs healthy, they need to find a way to get more out of these backs than just one plays each play, right? And the way to do that is to sort of pair Jacobs with either Damian Harris or Bo Scarborough. And if you want to do that, this is the game to start doing that in terms of really trying to throw different looks and make a very aggressive defensive front have to account for so many different weapons coming out of the backfield. You have Jalen, Bo or Damian, and Jacobs. You have all three of them in the backfield. That creates sort of a very tough prospect for a defense, especially a defense that just wants to play really fast, that wants to come after you, that doesn't necessarily want to have to be patient and stay disciplined and everything. That sort of forces them potentially into an uncomfortable situation, I would think.
Yeah. I mean, you can just, like start with two of these guys in the backfield and have one of them split out wide. Like there's a lot of ways you can get creative with the talent you have at running back that we kind of haven't seen yet, and that they can use these guys in a lot of different ways going forward. And I agree with what you said. This is a game where there's really going to be an opportunity for that.
Right. Now it is worth mentioning. These are things. This idea that these sort of two back sets are things that we have talked about before. It is something that Alabama basically has never done.
Yeah.
Even when they had, even in early 2014, before Kenyon got hurt, when they had T.J. Yeldon, Derrick Henry, and Kenyon Drake, I don't even think that they were doing it then with sort of getting Drake and one of the other backs on the field at the same time. So they really have never done this.
Yeah.
The issue becomes, if you do that, who do you take off the field? So what sort of personnel grouping do you have? Do you go with no tight ends at that point?
Yeah, 20.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you go with sort of a 20 look and go with no tight ends, or are you comfortable pulling a wide receiver off the field? So there's always sort of a trade-off, right? You can't have everybody on the field. You can't play with 3 offensive linemen and put all your skill guys on the field. But I think that if there's a game to sort of try that, it would be this game. I think that's why I specifically bring it up within the context of discussing this matchup, because I think it has the potential to be positively impactful against Vanderbilt.
Other side of the ball, or do we have any other?
Yeah, Mitch, do you have anything else in terms of the Kansas State offense against the Vandy defense and things that we can glean from that performance?
Not really.
Yeah, I didn't. That quarterback could not really throw the ball much.
Yeah.
Carter already said he read off the passing stats, and he already said that they haven't really faced anybody of note in terms of a quarterback who can throw the ball or a passing game as a whole that can be successful. Excuse me. The Kansas State quarterback was really, and he also. It's also worth noting that the Kansas State quarterback essentially gave the game away. He had 2 very ugly turnovers in the fourth quarter that allowed Vanderbilt to start a couple drives with very good field position and ultimately score the go-ahead touchdown. So it was very important, obviously, and this holds true every game, but very important for Jalen not to do that. The Kansas State quarterback got in trouble once and threw one of his picks when he left the pocket when he shouldn't have. And started rolling to his ball up down the sideline. And I know we already discussed Jalen, but one of the things that really bothered me a couple times against Colorado State, it's one thing to sort of be one read and done, but it's another thing to sort of be one read and then for his sort of, it's like he has this clock where it's one read and then his impulse is just to leave the pocket. And he really has to try to break that impulse because once you leave the pocket on these sorts of plays, you're not going to really make anything happen. Yeah. You're not really going to be able to throw the ball successfully, and you're probably not going to be able to run the ball because successful quarterback scrambles don't usually happen when the quarterback stands in the pocket and then leaves the pocket. It usually happens where the quarterback stands in the pocket, pressure comes, and then he just runs through the middle. So when he leaves the pocket, it's a lost play every time, essentially. 75% of the time it's going to be a throwaway, and the other 25% of the time it's almost very unlikely to go for anything of anything positive. So that's really maybe the big thing that I want to watch with Jalen in this game is whether, because I'm sure they pointed that out to him on film this week, and I'd like to see that sort of lesson, I think.
Yeah, like I'm perfectly happy for Jay. Like, a lot of people are saying, people made a big deal that he's sort of been one read and go. Well, to me, if you're gonna make your one read and it's not there, if a space opens up and you're decisive and you tuck the ball and get downfield, that's a good play for him. Like, exactly. I will happily take him being one read and go if that means either a complete
5 yards
or 5+ yards. Yeah, and a lot of times he's getting more than that. He's getting 10, 12. Yeah. I'm fine with him making one read as long as his response is to be decisive and tuck the ball and go rather than being sort of wishy-washy about it.
Be decisive, and keep the play in the middle of the field as much as possible.
Yeah.
Roll bootlegs, roll-ups. That only works when it's designed. It does not work when it's ad-libbed. So there needs to be a real emphasis on keeping the ball in the middle of the field.
You're not Aaron Rodgers.
Right. Exactly. You're not Aaron Rodgers, and your receivers. And I don't. I'm not sure how great the Alabama receivers are in scramble drills anyway, and how in sync Jalen is going to be with them on scramble drills. So just really, really, really emphasize. Like Carter said, I'm totally fine with Jalen being a sort of a one read and go guy. Maybe that even fits. That probably fits his style and his skill set the best. But that one read and go has got to be go, and it can't be slowly move outside the pocket and wait for something to develop and then ultimately throw the ball away or run out of bounds. It's got to be like go, as in kick your way through the pocket, get 5 yards, and then play the next down.
Yeah.
So, can we move on to the other side of the ball?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this matchup is not nearly as interesting just because, whatever opinions you have about the Alabama defense and whether or not it looks like at this point that they're going to get both Rashaan Evans and Dylan Moses back. I think Jennings is more of an open question. I don't know if Saban said anything on his radio show about that, about them tonight, but even if if they decide to keep those guys out for another game, Vandy is not the type of thing, the type of offense, the type of talent that really threatens them. I mean, it's scheme-wise, they're going to be, they're really going to look to slow things down and not make mistakes. The way Vandy wins this game is by mucking it up, essentially.
Yeah.
They are not a high-tempo team. They're not going to sling the ball all over the place. They're just, if Alabama's not turning the ball over deep in their own side of the field and putting the defense in bad situations, I don't see how Vandy scores more than about 10 points in this game.
Right.
So I think as long as the defense is just, solid and doesn't have any big, blown coverages, missed assignments, any major busts, I just don't see a lot to be threatened by here.
I want to echo one point that you made in particular, which I think is a very good one. Vanderbilt's path to winning this game is like a 17-16, 17-14 type of game. That is the only way that they're going to win. So if Alabama breaks the 20-point threshold, the game is already over.
Yep.
There's no way that Vanderbilt can win a game with Alabama where Alabama gets over 20. And a lot of people say that that's, it's sort of ironic because people think that sort of the way to beat Alabama is to beat them in a shootout. Well, that's not the way that Vanderbilt is going to beat Alabama.
Yeah.
The way that Vanderbilt is going to beat Alabama is in a very low-scoring, very sloppy, very turnover-filled game. So they're going to come out. They're going to get in their pro style. They're going to run the ball probably a lot.
Yep.
They have to try to. You alluded to the fact earlier that they haven't really been able to unlock Webb so far this year.
Yeah, I think he's averaging like 3 yards a carry or less.
Now I think that dovetails with the fact that their offensive line is kind of unimpressive. It was bad last year. It does not seem to be all that improved this year. So I'm not really sure how they can move the ball on Alabama. It's a more of a pro style team too as well, yeah. which as has been discussed ad nauseum both on this podcast and in sort of every other medium that discusses Alabama football, pro style offenses just do not do well against Nick Saban defenses. So I don't even know. I don't even know how I would go about trying to move the ball if I was Vanderbilt, because they can't come out like a lot of times we go into matchups and we say, wow, this team should come out and they should just sling the ball all over the field. And they should be willing to take their incompletions and they should be willing to stall drives. But there's no reason to waste time running the ball against Alabama because it is not going to work. But here,
Vandy can't be that team.
Right. They have to be the team that runs the ball and tries to win 17-14. So I don't.
They don't have a guy, and they don't even have a guy like Colorado State had last in Jackson. I mean, they don't have a big 6'5" guy that can even go up and make plays. So
their top receiver, I forget what his name is a guy who's gone for a fair amount of big. Trent Sherfield. He's averaging like 20 yards a catch.
Yeah.
But he's 6'1", 205 pounds. Like they just don't have. They have some tight ends, and their main tight end or something. They've targeted a lot, but they just don't have those big athletes at wide receiver, the kind of guys that really threaten you. Certainly not to the extent that Florida State did, or to the extent that that Ole Miss will. Although for Ole Miss isn't obviously this is looking ahead to next week. Didn't AJ Brown get hurt or something? I don't know if he
did. He?
Let's see.
Yeah, he's got a sprain. He got an MCL sprain.
Ooh. So
out this week, but he might play against Alabama.
Okay.
Still, that's a never want a guy to get hurt, but that's a good sign for Alabama.
Yeah. Yeah. So as far as Vandy goes, I don't know. I think they're still going to come out. They have to try to establish the run. You want to be concerned if people want to be concerned about the defensive front. If they can't come out and stop the run against Vanderbilt this week, then I think it'd probably be time for a little bit of concern, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially if Anthony Jennings ends up being available.
Yeah.
If they get some of those linebackers back and they still can't stop the run against Vandy, then that's an area for concern. But
Yeah.
I mean, they stopped the run against Florida State. Like, I would just be absolutely baffled if it just, you know, it would be shocking. It would be really shocking if you know, a Vanderbilt team that's hasn't had success unlocking their best offensive player against you know, two cupcakes in Kansas State.
Wow.
Could come out and establish the run against Alabama. And that I think dovetails into Vandy's main problem for this game is if you are a pro-style offense whose best player is a running back, you don't beat Alabama. You just don't. That's not how this works.
Yeah.
And especially when the overall talent level is where Vandy is. It's just as Vanderbilt is a solid like that. This is by far the best team Derek Mason has had there. You know, it's a credit to them what they've put together this year, but this just isn't. There are teams with Vandy's talent level that could maybe put a little bit of a scare into you, but the way Vandy plays, they're just not going to.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, you know, it wouldn't shock me if this game was like 13-3 at the half.
Oh, I fully expect that. Yeah. Are we do we want to move into predictions because I have a fairly detailed one.
Well, I would say before we get into that, there's sort of one other question that I sort of would have for you guys. Presumably Vanderbilt is going to find themselves behind the chains quite a bit due to what we anticipate is an inability to consistently run the football, which means that they're going to be in situations they're going to be facing passing downs and they're going to have to throw the ball. Now, the bread and butter of this Alabama defense, I think, as proven by the performance in the first week, is going to be the manufactured pressure game. That is that even before Terrell Lewis and Christian Miller went down, that's what they were going to do. And it's even more so the case now. But as Mitch pointed out earlier, we haven't seen that the last 2 weeks, probably because they just don't want to show that stuff.
Yeah.
They don't want to show that stuff in situations where they don't have to show that stuff. So I'm wondering how much we see it this week.
Right.
In terms of.
Yeah, and to maybe hint at an answer for that, it really doesn't look like they're going to need to. So Vandy on passing downs, success rate 75th, ISO PPP 122, but passing down sack rates tied for. They have not allowed a sack on a passing down, and despite that, they've had very little success on passing downs. So. I would suspect we're not going to see a lot of manufactured pressure here either because everything about the way Vandy has played suggests that you won't need it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you don't need it, there's no reason to sort of tip your hand as far as all the different things you're going to do. Like it's so that you could have a team 5 weeks, 6 weeks down the line into the season saying, "Wow, okay, so we're going against Alabama. We got to be real." Worried about the manufactured pressure game on third down, and that team only has 1 game's worth of film to look at in order to attempt to sort of scheme around some of these blitz packages that Alabama is going to throw at you. So I think it's very important because I truly feel that a lot of Alabama's success this season is going to come down to the success of their blitz packages. And I think that keeping that stuff as close to the vest in games where you don't necessarily need it to win is going to be very important in order to allow it to be even more successful as the season goes on. So I'd like to see them try to be able to have success on passing downs without having to resort to that.
Yeah, and that's an area where you kind of cross your fingers for Rashaan Evans to be back this game, and to a lesser extent Dylan Moses, because you bring those guys in and you move them outside on passing downs, And if they can get you just a little bit more, that lessens the amount you have to manufacture pressure. That lessens the amount you put on film for the future. And even if they don't have those guys back and really effective against Vanderbilt, they probably won't need it. But it'd be nice to see.
Yeah, Evans had a kind of a weird tweet earlier this week, didn't he? About how it seemed to indicate that he's still hurt.
I was really hoping that it said something that's like, it's not about how I feel, it's about what needs to get done, or one of those like slogans that student athletes love to tweet. Like they're all about that shit. But I'm really hoping and crossing my fingers that that's how I feel in like a mental, emotional sense and not in a physical sense, because I really don't, a groin's a tricky injury. Like that's the sort of thing where like you can feel like you're okay, and then you get back out there and it just gets steadily worse and worse. It's the sort of thing that's really easy to regress.
Right.
So, if he's borderline, Nick, man, just keep him out.
Hold him out again.
Yeah.
Because I'd much rather have him for Ole Miss.
Yeah.
Than for this game. But it's clear, Rashaan Evans is very quickly becoming one of the most important players on this entire defense in terms of they really need him back and effective and healthy and versatile in order to kind of have the defense that we anticipated they might have coming into the year. So this is not the game to rush him back for, I don't think. So but like we talked about earlier in the show, it does seem like he's going to play. So hopefully that's an indication that he is, if not 100%, close enough to 100%, where he's not going to risk re-aggravating some sort of injury and missing another month, because that would be the worst thing that could happen. So I guess we'll see. Do we want to move into predictions?
Yeah. So I think the line right now is 19.5.
Yeah.
That feels about right.
Yeah, I see a late cover.
Okay.
I would look for a late cover also.
Yeah. So I think I fully expect this one to like not be pretty at the half. Yeah. I think it's probably going to be like 13-3, 10-3, something like that. And then Alabama kind of opens it up late, and you end up with something like 35-10, or they're definitely going to kick some field goals in this one. So let's say 34-10.
I think that Alabama is going to have more offensive success early in this game than a lot of people are anticipating, because I think that Alabama is going to make Jalen the focal point of the offense again. They're not going to try to hide anything. And I think that Vanderbilt has absolutely no answer for the different things that he's able to do. And I also think that Alabama is going to have a lot of built-in counters for the stuff that Vanderbilt might try to do in order to combat Jalen. And because of that, I think that Alabama in the first half is going to hit at least a couple very explosive plays. And I think it's going to be like 21-3 at the half.
Okay.
And I think Alabama will coast from there.
I would definitely like to see that.
Yeah.
I'll call that my preferred outcome.
I mean, for me, it all depends on, how much they want to approach this, like the first SEC road game of the season versus playing Vanderbilt. Because if they want to go into it as the first SEC road game, then I think they could come out and put 20-25 up in the first half. I see it like in the 35-40 point range for Alabama and 13, 17 for Vandy, something like that.
That would be great if Alabama could be 35-40. I think that would ease a lot of concerns that people have about how this offense is going to play if they can be up there, like, if they could put like 400 total yards or something on Vandy, which I really think is very possible.
Yeah.
Then I think people will maybe start to relax a little bit about how the offense is going to fare the rest of the year.
Yeah.
Have we had a non-offensive touchdown yet?
Yeah, I don't think there's been one.
No.
I think they're due.
Yeah, that would be interesting. They've gotten some picks. We've gotten a number of picks actually.
Yeah. In fact, I tweeted this earlier in the week. The only member of Alabama's starting nickel secondary to not have a pick is Minka Fitzpatrick.
Yeah.
I would be surprised if by the end of this game Shermer doesn't have like 2 or 3 picks.
Yeah, I think he probably will. I think one of the big things that I want to see from the defense, and this is something that Mitch talked about earlier, I'd like to see them sort of clean up the missed tackle issue. Yeah. That is very un-Alabama-like. I'm not going to say it was like a catastrophically bad against Colorado State, but it's not. It was a little too sloppy for what we're all used to, and I want to see them really clean that up. That's almost like the tackling stuff is almost something that we've taken for granted a lot of things when it comes to Alabama football under Nick Saban. But I think that maybe the thing we've taken for granted the most is that they just don't miss tackles.
Yeah. Well, there was a whole Landon Collins did an interview this week where he was talking about part of the reason he's been so good the last year or so. Part of the reason he never misses tackles is because of the way he was taught to tackle at Alabama. Like that's not an accident. Like it's not just they've recruited a bunch of really good players and those guys tackle well. Like it's really something that flows from Saban and flows from this coaching staff and the stats bear that out. I think I don't remember where I saw this and I don't remember the exact stats, but Alabama leads the country in having the fewest missed tackles over the last decade or so by a massive margin. Like it's really it's not close.
Yeah.
It's insane how big the gap is between Alabama and not most teams, but the number 2 team.
And that's really that. I don't want to say that's not. I don't want to say that talent plays no role there because it obviously does. It obviously plays a role, but a lot of that goes beyond talent, right? The stuff that Carter's talking about, the effort that these players put in on a play-to-play basis. So I think first SEC game, I'd like to see that sort of cleaned up. Because this defense, there's going to be some things that they're not going to do well, such as probably make explosive plays around the line of scrimmage, or make splash plays around the line of scrimmage. So you have to that puts even more of an emphasis on being solid in other areas. And this can't. People's worst fears are going to be realized with regards to this defense if tackling is suddenly an issue. So it is. I don't expect it to be an issue, but for a little bit of peace of mind, it would be nice if it was sort of cleaned up on Saturday. Yeah. So I'd like to see that. We had talked a little bit before the show. It's kind of cool. This is the longest that out. I'm not phrasing this well. Alabama has played road games at all other SEC opponents more recently than they played at Vandy. They haven't been to Vandy in a long time, longer than anyone else.
Since Saban's first year in 2007.
So I'm excited. So I'm excited for that. This isn't really about the actual ins and outs of the game itself, but I like watching Alabama play in different stadiums and different atmospheres, and I'm excited to see them sort of take the field in Nashville on Saturday. I think that'll be fun.
Yeah.
I
think did we have a question?
We do have one question.
Ooh.
John Swire says he's going to game day in New York City. What sign should he bring?
I'm guessing it's going to be something that has to do
something that involves Nick Saban's personal feelings about.
Yeah.
Easily.
Speaking of road games, yeah, I feel like that's probably going to be on full display on Saturday. So that is kind of weird though, right? Why are they doing?
I don't know. I don't even know what game they're doing that for.
Maybe they're just not doing it for a game. If they're like, I guess I haven't really poured over. I know there's not much this weekend, but is there like nothing? There's what TCU and Oklahoma State is this weekend, right?
What? Mississippi State and Georgia.
Mississippi State, Georgia.
Ooh. Okay, that's not bad. And
Yeah.
TCU Oklahoma State, I think, right?
Yep.
So that's
Penn State, Iowa.
Okay, well that's interesting. That's interesting. Speaking of Penn State, I did this was made a big deal about by a certain New York sports radio talk show guy. So I kind of that's how I was made aware of this. But did you guys see what James Franklin did on Saturday at the end of the game?
Oh yeah, he
icing the kicker.
Oh man,
that's the was it Jim Harbaugh going for 2 at the end of the What's Your Deal, Man?
I mean, it's incredible. Like this is not. God, I don't even know what to say. Like you are not Urban Meyer calling a timeout to kick a late field goal against Georgia in a big game like that. You are playing like nobody.
Well, and he explained. He tried to say that it was like they weren't lined up right or something like that. But it's just like you're up 56-0. Just like take a penalty, man. Like,
like you wanted the shutout. I mean, like you, and that's I don't know. I think it's funny. And Franklin maybe this Franklin with loose ties to the main topic of this podcast because maybe this has a chance to be Vanderbilt's best team since he left.
I think it early indication that it is very clearly the best team since.
Yeah. So, but anyways, I just thought about that when you mentioned Penn State. So, but yeah. So okay. So I guess not really. It does seem like game day had some options, but maybe not a ton of options, which is why you have a little Times Square type deal.
Yeah, Times Square is an interesting choice. You think they could have gone for something? I don't know, a little less touristy.
And also like people in New York don't really give a shit about college football.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I mean, you have New York City, so you have people, you have transfer.
Yeah, there's like a big Michigan presence there, isn't there?
Huge Michigan presence there. Because you have a lot of people. I think you have a lot of people from New York that went to Michigan for school and then have come back to New York since. I personally know at least a couple people who did that. So, but it's really not like a college football hotbed, and you would think they would put this in a place where it is.
What about all the Rutgers fans?
Well, that's yes. Well,
all 7 of them.
Yeah. Well, the Rutgers fans were out in full force in a couple in those Ray Rice years, and then they sort of dispersed rather quickly following following Ray Rice leaving and what has happened to that program since. But yeah, it's I guess some Syracuse fans they've got a they're only 21-point underdogs, I think, playing in Baton Rouge. Right?
Right. There's that. I forgot that LSU went to Syracuse last year. That was weird.
Yeah.
That was a close game, wasn't it? That was.
Yeah, I think so. And then Fournette went off late or something.
It was for a while. Yeah.
Yeah. But could you imagine, like, they're playing home against Syracuse and they're like 21-point favorites?
Okay, this is. I think we can wrap up the broadcast now because we've now transitioned into the topics that we normally discuss when we're chatting.
There was one more question though. I think McGee had asked something about Bama.
Right.
Bama making the playoff as a one-loss SEC team.
So what's the question? I'm sorry.
So the question is, can Bama make the playoffs with one loss during kind of a down SEC year?
Are they SEC champs in this scenario?
Hard not to be, right?
It is not specified, but I mean, if Alabama, I think, a lot has been made about the decline of the SEC. Whatever sort of built-in benefit of the doubt the SEC as a conference has lost, Alabama has not lost. And if Alabama is a 12-1 SEC champion, Alabama is going to be in the playoff. There's just, I made this point to somebody in person earlier in the week that the SEC with Alabama has kind of become a USC in the Pac-12 or the Pac-10, right, in the mid-2000s situation. Like, people may make a stink about how good or not good the SEC is, but no one. Alabama still has plenty of benefit of the doubt built in as to how good they're going to be.
Outside of some scenario where, say, Oklahoma, Penn State, USC, and Clemson all run the table, I cannot envision a scenario in which a 12-1 Alabama SEC champion does not make the playoff.
Yeah, just as a matter of probability, you're not like having 4 undefeated Power 5 champions is, right. And one of them not being Alabama is just incredibly unlikely.
Yeah, I don't.
Even in that scenario, I think Bama's still in. I just.
Yeah. Well, think about like, that's okay. So that's interesting. I'm not so sure about that. But that's interesting though. There's so many unknowns, right? In discussing that scenario now, you know so little about how all those teams got to that point. Right. So it's hard to say. But in terms of how much the strength or weakness of the SEC is going to be held against Alabama, think about Washington last year. The SEC might be down; they are not going to be that down. Okay, and not only did Washington play nobody, but the only time they played a good team, they got smoked by that team, and they still made the play. They still made the playoffs. So it's not going to be a factor if they win the conference. Where it might be a factor is if they don't win the conference. If they go 11-1, but don't win the West because, say, Auburn runs the table or something, or if they go 12-0 but then lose in the SEC championship game, then the relative strength of the SEC might come into play more.
Right.
But Alabama is free to drop a game, in my opinion. They are totally free to drop a single game.
Well, and I feel as unthreatened by the rest of the SEC as I have in a very long time. So,
I mean, we have to wrap it up. I know, but like, if you had to pick right now, if you had to pick an SEC game for Alabama to lose, let's not include the SEC championship because we don't know opponent or anything like that. But if you guys had to pick one SEC game for Alabama to lose, which one would you pick?
Auburn? Maybe Mississippi State?
Yeah, those are probably your top. Like, let's say, Alabama doesn't really improve much on offense, and Auburn plays really great on defense, and they get a whole lot better on offense. And that game's in Auburn. So, like, that's a possibility. I think I said last week, I don't feel comfortable this early in the year writing off Auburn.
You can never do that to a Gus team.
Yeah.
You can never do that to a Gus team.
You go on the road to Starkville, and, Alabama has like a 2015 Ole Miss type situation where they turn the ball over a bunch of times and Fitzgerald just goes nuts.
What do you guys make of that game? Last Saturday, the Mississippi State LSU game. I didn't honestly get to watch much of it. I only saw little bits and pieces.
LSU shot themselves in the foot a lot.
Yeah,
and just kind of fell apart mentally. Like LSU is not Mississippi State is not 30 points better than LSU.
Right.
Yeah.
They played a great game, and LSU shot themselves in the foot and then completely fell apart mentally after they were done shooting themselves in the foot. I don't with that game in Tuscaloosa, I don't see this as the year LSU breaks through and breaks their losing streak to Alabama, but I don't expect that game to be easy just because it never is, and LSU has that kind of talent, and I think they probably play a much better game against Alabama than they did against Mississippi State.
Yeah. I could see that. Okay.
All right. I think we'll wrap it up there for the week. We'll see y'all next week, going over this game and previewing Ole Miss. But until then, roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
Yeah, roll Tide.